Hi guys, I'm Talia's Threads and today we are learning how to make an unlined sequin skirt. What you're going to need is some sequin fabric, and what sequin fabric you choose is going to decide how you're going to bind the edges. So this is a non-stretch sequin on mesh, and I have made my own 3/8 of an inch double fold bias tape, and I made this out of nylon Taslan because it's slightly shiny and luxe looking, and I would have wanted to use satin, but I just knew that that would be so fiddly. If you were using a stretch sequin fabric, this is fold over elastic, and you can just fold this over the edge of your sequins so that none are touching your skin. This one I have here is 1/4 inch wide. I would recommend starting at least 3/8 of an inch wide because I feel like this is not really wide enough to cover the sequins enough. And then you need some elastic to go into the waistband. This is 2-inch wide elastic, but you can use whatever you like. If you're using a stretch sequin, you could make the waistband out of like a jersey fabric. You may not even need elastic anyway. However, I will be giving instructions on how to make a waistband enclosing elastic with top stitching. For the skirt, I'm just going to draw a really simple version of what I did. So my skirt is wide enough for my hips and it's tapered in slightly at the waist, but you can use a pattern like a bias cut skirt pattern would be a really great choice. If you aren't going to cut it on the bias, I would size up and then curve the bottom corners of the pattern on the front and back. And I would say, like, I'm looking at this 5-inch by 5-inch square, and I would say curving around that much would be a really good amount to start with, because if you do like a really small curve, the bias tape might be difficult to sew, it might pucker or maybe pull and not lay flat. So give it a nice big curve so that you can sew around the bias tape easily. And then you need 2 of these, a front and a back panel. And then the waistband, I just measured the top of this, and that is the same width as my waistband. And then the height, measure the width of your elastic, so mine is 2 inches, and then multiply it by 2 because you're going to fold it over both sides, so that equals 4 inches. And then I'm using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, but I'm going to add a little bit extra because I want to have some overhang left over after I've sewn this. So I'm just going to add an inch, and you can always trim it off after, you'll see what I mean. So I'm going to cut this by 5 inches high by the width of my waistband, and then you need 2 waistband pieces, and we're going to sew them together at the side seams. Start at the top of the side seam. So this is the waistband here, and this is the side seam. Go all the way down. I'm going to go around this curve, around the curve on the other side, and all the way up to the side seam on this side. So 3 edges, the sides and the bottom, will be bound, and I'm going to repeat that for both the front and the back pattern pieces. Lay the bias tape directly on top And you can choose if you want the front to overlap the back or the back to overlap the front. I don't think you'll even notice it on mine because the bias tape's very subtle. And I'm going to stitch down one side to where I want my split to end, and then I'm going to stitch across and back up the other side, so there's a double side seam, and I'm going to do that on both sides. I've just held my skirt up against myself, and if you're doing a mini you probably won't want to do a split, but I've just marked where I think I want my side seams to stop so that there will be a nice like gap so I can walk easily. If you're doing a mini skirt, then I would just stop just above where the curves start to diverge from each other. So I have my waistband here, and I have placed it right sides together and sewn with a straight stitch and pressed that seam open so that when I fold it over the elastic, it's going to sit nice and flat. Pre-press this edge here where it's going to be folded. This is 2 inches wide, and then I want to press in that much plus the seam allowance. So I'm going to fold this over 2 inches and 3/8. And I'm using the selvage edge here, so I'm not finishing it off, but if you haven't used the edge of the fabric, then I would go and serge one side or do a zigzag stitch, whatever you want to do. But then the raw edge, fold it over. So there's a little extra overhang here, and that's what's going to cover the sequins once we've added the waistband to the skirt. Now I'm going to match up the side seams with the side seams on the skirt. So the raw edge of the slightly shorter side is going right sides facing with the top of the skirt. And I'm going to use clips because it's a little bulky now. And I'm just going to go around the top with a straight stitch at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Fold the waistband up away from the sequins, but keep the seam allowance pointing up towards the waistband, and then top stitch it down a 1/4 inch away from the seam so that the sequins can't fold down and touch your skin when you're wearing it. So now I'm going to take a length of elastic that feels comfortable around my waist. Some people like to do some negative ease. I usually do my exact waist measurement, and that means it doesn't pull too tightly. And I'll show you how to stitch the ends together without creating any bulk. Push the 2 ends of the elastic up against each other, and then using a triple step zigzag stitch, just backstitch it in place at the beginning and end. I like this method better than using a normal zigzag because it won't pull the ends of the elastic together and cause a bump. Okay, so I'm going to mark my quarters on the waistband and on the elastic with pins. And then you match these two up to get the quarters. And then with the skirt, you've already got the side seams, so I'm just going to match the side seams up. And then using my pin markers, I'm going to match them together and then make sure the elastic is right up against this fold line here. I should have pinned my quarters on the outside of the skirt because I'm going to stitch from the other side, so I'm just going to transfer my markings to the outside. So match your pins and make sure the elastic is right up against this fold line here. and then fold the inside of the waistband over. Hold all the layers in place. So this is through the outer, the inner, and the elastic. And do the same with all four. Don't worry if it starts puckering up or if it's not laying flat. We'll be stretching it when we stitch it down. Okay, now I'm going to take it to the machine and I'm going to add a line of top stitching 1/2 inch from the top, and then even though it's going to look slightly uneven, I'm going to go over this line of stitching for my bottom line because I don't want to have multiple layers of stitching.